Rupa Mudra. Cross your wrists with your left wrist further away from you, and your right wrist closer to you, and your palms facing the side walls. Hook your pinky fingers together, and then touch your ring and middle finger to your thumb pad. And then extend the index finger straight up, like goalposts. Okay, Rupa Mudra. Right?
What's it called?
Rupa, R-U-P-A, Rupa, form or appearance, to evoke the presence of the deity. So anybody have trouble following those instructions? We clear? Let's do it again just in case, okay? Cross your wrists once again with the left wrist further away from your right wrist closer to you and the palms facing the side walls. Hook your pinky fingers together and then touch the pad of your your ring and your middle finger to your thumb, and then extend the index finger straight up like goalposts. Yeah, Rupa Mudra. All right, so close your eyes. For a few seconds in Rupa Mudra, get in touch with your body, breath, brain, and mind. So that means notice what musculoskeletal configuration you're in order to hold Rupa Mudra. Notice what kind of respiratory demand, however slight, is being made upon you to hold Rupa Mudra. And then distinguish your senses from your intellect. That's the brain, from your mind. Notice what you're seeing, touching, tasting, smelling, and hearing while you're here. Right? That's your brain giving you a direct impression. And then your mind is the part that's analyzing it, categorizing it, spinning it in some way, telling you what it is, defining it for you. Right? So for the next few seconds, be aware of body, breath, brain, and mind while you're holding Rupa Mudra, and begin now. Maintaining Rupa Mudra, now let your meditative focus be on visualizing the inhale coming into the crown of your head and visualizing the exhale going out through the center of your chest. So that means your inhale is going to draw from the planes above form through the crown chakra to feed your spiritual intuition, and your exhale is going to feed the world through your heart based on whatever it is that you're taking in from those planes that are above and beyond form. All right, so for the next minute or so, inhale through the seventh chakra, exhale through the fourth chakra, and begin now. Now your inner journaling question for the night. what excuses do you tell yourself, believe in, and therefore maintain that prevents you from practicing more than you currently do? And it doesn't matter if they're legitimate or not, could be really good reasons, but really be clear about what it is that prevents you from doing what, in one level, you say, I love this. And somehow by not chunking out enough time to do it more, you box yourself into a corner and therefore don't get the benefits that could be conferred based on an accrual system. You got to keep doing it in order to get established in it. So what is it that you tell yourself that gives you an easy pass to not practice more? 1 minute and start now. Okay, bring the palms together in the center of your chest into Namaste. Let's chant the mantra Om 3 times together as a group, and the invocation to Patanjali, which we'll have up on the screen, and you can chant along. I'll chant one line, and then you will chant a line together. All right, so Om first 3 times. Inhale. Yogena chitasya padena vacham, Yogena chitasya padena vacham, Malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena, Malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena, Yopakarotam pravaram muninam, Yopakarotam pravaram muninam, Patanjalim pranjalir anatosmi, Patanjalim pranjalir anatosmi, Abahu purushakaram, Abahu purushakaram, Shanka chakrasidarinam, Shanka chakrasidarinam, Sahasra shirasam shvetam, Sahasra shirasam shvetam, Pranamami Patanjalim, Pranamami Patanjalim, Hari Om, Hari Om. Close your eyes, bow your head, salute the essence of yoga within yourself. Keeping the eyes closed, bring your head up on your spine, relax your palms face up in your lap, and gently open your eyes. Well, I am glad to be alive today. I didn't take for granted anything since last week, so I am here and I'm happy, and I hope that you are too. And we have a friend who's teaching a workshop here on the weekend, joining us tonight as a special guest, so we'll mark it for her program later, yeah, right?
Yes.
Everybody else here is supposed to be here?
Except Marcy. Yes.
Marcy coming tonight? She's
Yes.
She is? All right. We have to begin. All right, so we have begun, yeah? So what I've been trying to do, good. What I've been trying to do with you is to expose you to a couple of different approaches to yoga. First, using kind of classical understanding which is reflected in the teaching stories that have been passed down. And remember, it's in some way supposed to make sense to your left brain, but since it's experiential also, at some point, we're not limited to understanding only through the left brain. So first, here's another story told in tradition called the Silk Thread. I first learned about it through Vivekananda, the main disciple of Ramakrishna, who came to the country in 1893. He was at the first Parliament of World Religions. Made quite a stir there. Okay, the Silk Thread. Returning to our subject, we next come to pranayama, controlling the breathing. What has that to do with concentrating the powers of mind? Breath is like the flywheel of the machine, the body. In a big engine, you find the flywheel first moving, and that motion is conveyed to finer and finer machinery until most of the delicate and finest machinery in the machine is in motion. The breath is that flywheel, supplying and regulating the motive power to everything in this body. So that's the lead-in. Or as my first teacher used to say, life begins with breath and ends with the end of breath. All right, so the story. There was once a minister to a great king. He fell into disgrace. The king, as a punishment, ordered him to be shut up in the top of a very high tower. This was done, and the minister was left there to perish. He had a faithful wife, however, who came to the tower at night and called to her husband at the top to know what she could do to help him. He told her to return to the tower the following night and bring with her a long rope, some stout twine, pack thread, silken thread, a beetle, and a little honey. Wondering much, the good wife obeyed her husband and brought him the desired articles. The husband directed her to attach the silken thread firmly to the beetle and then to smear its horns with a drop of honey and set it free on the wall to the tower with its head pointing upwards. She obeyed all these instructions, and the beetle started on its long journey. Smelling the honey ahead, it slowly crept onwards in the hope of reaching the honey, until at last it reached to the top of the tower, when the minister grasped the beetle and got possession of the silken thread. He told his wife to tie the other end to the pack thread, and after he had drawn up the pack thread, he repeated the process with the stout twine and lastly with the rope. Then the rest was easy. The minister descended from the tower by means of the rope and made his escape. In this body of ours, the breath motion is the silken thread. By laying hold of it and learning to control it, we grasp the pack thread of the nerve currents, and from these, the stout twine of our thoughts, and lastly, the rope of prana, controlling which we reach freedom. You buy that shit? Just a joke, just a joke.
If you're selling it.
But every buyer needs a seller, that's the thing, right? So they put a lot of investment. Don't edit that out.
No editing.
Show them what real yogis. Show them what real yogis talk about. Not the yogis that have to edit it out to give the spin for the normal masses, right? So unreal, right? So that's their story. Now I also say poetry is really good because men and women throughout history can articulate these things really, really well, and it expands it. What's really important about poetry is it makes you think metaphorically. You know you're not supposed to be looking for one-to-one correspondence in reality to these things. It's providing images for you, right? And everything we're doing here is a romance with your imagination. So expanding that particular part of your brain functioning is really helpful. But more than that, it takes language out of religion. So important to learn to separate religious thinking from spiritual thinking. Sometimes they converge, but very often they don't. And if a person isn't connected to an organized religious tradition, maybe they think they don't have any spirituality in their life. They could be very, very religious and extremely spiritual, but not following a liturgical year under any organized formulation. And besides, yoga, like anything else, can be filled with fanaticism and dogmatism, but it's supposed to take you beyond fundamentalism. It's supposed to. Now, history shows it doesn't, because human beings practice yoga, and human beings mess up everything they practice it. And only very few of us find a balance to not mess it up and be a really good, bona fide representative of that thing. Nonetheless, this is Rumi, one of my favorite mystical poets, and also ever since, even before 9/11, I was initiated in the Sufi tradition back in 1970, so I have a very, very different view of the mystical quality of Islam, separated from the jihadist mindset, which for a mystic, it's always about the internal battles against the ego, the heretic inside yourself, and not projected upon other people who haven't accepted Allah like somebody else would have a come to Jesus moment. This is called the guest house. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. They may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Very, very different than praksha prati praksha bhavana. Always counteract the thought with the opposite thought. Don't think bad, think good. Don't think not nice, think nice. This is the way to become a wet noodle, a snowflake yogi. You ever meet real yogis? They got grit, they got balls, they're in your face, they're very direct. They're distinct people for someone who has no ego. It's absurd. They just don't have as much egoistic, narcissistic grandiosity as most people have, because they have some humility at the same time. But they're very bold, very direct, very individual, at least I have found. So it's kind of interesting thing here, because this would tell you, I should be open to all the shadow influences and negative influences and others. I should accept my humanity. As opposed to yoga, I'm going to transcend my humanity and go beyond. Then you're always fighting. Remember, perfection is a yardstick with which to beat yourself. So if you want to always come up short, follow that path. I don't think so. Not the way I've been taught. Even my own teacher, says, I'm still evolving the poses. Maybe something more can come today. Purge your mind of the old. Don't go back to the way it was yesterday. That's inspiring for me. It isn't telling me that there's a final fixed place to get to. It's going to say, keep on creating what's better for you. Your own hierarchy of values that makes you reach for something that you don't currently have now, but it's an image of your mind. You may or may not get there, but the romance with your imagination makes you aspire to want to get there, because you think if you did that, I'd be a better person. And even the attempt to get there, it makes me a better person. Do I fail? Yes. Again and again? Yes. Less and less? I hope so. You have to ask my wife about that. Or maybe, some things, like I say, you have rocks in your psyche. It ain't going anywhere, and that part is just going to mess up your whole life. But you have other parts of your psyche that are much more fluid and much more open to change. We'll work with that and accept the fact that I got rocks in my psyche about this. And I'm from Brooklyn. What can I do? Use that as or whatever person says. I was born with a cleft lip, or I was born with an alcoholic gene, or whatever. Fine, right? But you have other parts of you that are not so fixed. Well, then work on that. All right. So don't forget, poetry is really good, and I tend toward the mystic poets because part of me wants to think of me as a bhakti, and doesn't matter what other people think as long as I do. That's the important thing for me. So I'm a bhakti. Now, I'm going to give our little... Say what? It's a good joke, tell me.
I was repeating what you said. I don't care if you think I'm back here or not, I am.
Right. My wife knows what that means, even though she doesn't know what a bhakti means. No, that's not true, Mark. Okay. I like these little PowerPoint. Mark, I just found out about this. There's a thing up here. Did I see it? Did I miss this out? Maybe it was on... I thought I saw a little thing that said dictation.
Yeah, it might be one of those things that only comes up when you're not looking for it.
Oh, keep quiet. Maybe it was on photo booth. I won't go into, but I swear I saw a thing. Remember, said, "You mean I could be voice overing this, and I didn't know that?" We have to check this out because that could be a whole new era. Oh boy. Okay, so this is called Journey to the Center. You nice guys are not supposed to see the presenter's tools. Shut up. Journey to the Center. There we go. All right. First of all, does everybody know that Shiva is only the Lord of Yoga, but Krishna is the Lord of Yogis? Honestly, come on, how many of you knew that? Yeah, all right, that's why I'm dropping some knowledge on you now.
Say that one more time.
Let's just drop that knowledge in. Okay, Shiva is the Lord of Yoga, but Krishna is the Lord of Yogis. Sorry, I had to do that. We got to get a fake microphone. Right? Go to the dollar store so I can do that. No, but now, ladies, remember, right? How far do we need to go back? You think mansplain was only in this generation? Come here, Parvati, let me tell you the 112 sutras about all yoga. You think she's like, great, you got mansplaining even now, right? Deal with it, okay? I don't believe their intention was truly to hold you down. Why did it come across that way? So I always like to tell this, just in case you think, remember my first teacher, Yogi Bhajan, was the worshiper of Adi Shakti, the primal principle, which is female, just like Shakti is a female goddess. But I always like to tell the story of Shankara, one of the Advaita Vedantist dualists, non-dualists, right? Everything was a form of God. And especially the formless is the most perfect expression of what it is, even though everything's a form. So he's walking around, he's very big defender about the formlessness and stuff like that. So he's walking and all of a sudden, he falls over, kind of like paralyzed on the road. And a young woman comes by and says, "Kind sir, what's wrong with you?" "I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I'm sorry, what's again is it? I have no Shakti." "Let that be a lesson to you, brother." And off she walks, the goddess. So from that moment on, he became a worshiper of the Divine Mother, right? Okay. So Shiva, in some way, is not only just a destroyer in terms of what we say, generating, organizing, destructive principles of the cosmos is one of the, acronyms for God. And so he represents those forces that supposedly you invite into your life when you want stuff to be flushed away. And you understand the importance of things being flushed away, right? Life can't go on unless there's stuff that's flushed away, whether it's the waste products that are in your own body that will kill you if you reabsorb your own toxins, or other stuff that isn't healthy for you that you got to get rid of and shed and let go of and whatever and so forth. But remember, almost all of the deities throughout the world who are deities of death and destruction, true for Kali as well, they're also almost always connected to creation. So you have the Shiva Lingam on one level, which you'll see in a moment, and then you also have the Tandava dance, just like, supernova explosion of the whole galaxy or whatever. So both these things go together, even though most of the time he's thought as the god of destruction. But anyway, he's certainly the god you pray to when you want your yoga practice to increase and cut through. But of course, you got to remember, he's kind of an ascetic dude. And his main mode of expression is hanging out in Mount Kailash. Now whether or not, Om Shiva Shankara Hari Hari Ganja, he had a little, recreation, I don't know if he needed it medically, a little recreational bong to help him, and then his eyelids are like that, Who knows? The deities have many, many faces, do they not? Why should we limit them in our human understanding, right? Oh, but it's okay. He can't smoke pot, but he can drink soma. That's okay? The nectar of the gods is okay, but not the old bud? Don't get me started on this. Anyway, he's the first one. We're making our pilgrimage to this, to the center of whatever Shiva represents in terms of drawing you. Ascetic tapas is what he's talking about. You want to do this? You study the sutras, it becomes really clear. Tivra Samvegan are the people who are supremely enthusiastic. For people like that, time is negated. They are not waiting for a couple of 100,000 lifetimes before they move up the scale. They're experiencing instant zap right now by the fervor of their desire to make this happen. Whereas the other students, as they're listed according to temperament, murdu, madhya, atimatra, dull, average, right, and somewhat keen, right? Well, by definition, it's going to take more time for you, right? Well, great. You want to hang out in the samsara and go up and down like that and experience more suffering? Go ahead, do it. But if you're tivra samvegan right now, I demand right now. Very different. Anyway, find out what your relationship is to how ascetic you want to be in drawing Shiva force into your life. All right, so we're all journeying towards the center, and a lot of times it's like a labyrinth. But you have to understand the difference between the things in your life which are labyrinth type and maze type. What's the difference between a labyrinth and a maze? Oh, you're asking me? That's what the dictionary is for. Go back to school. A labyrinth is designed to get you to the center, no matter what you do. All the wrong paths force you to go back, retrace, and you get to the center. But a maze is designed to keep you stuck and not find the center. So it's really important to understand these sacred architectural shapes and how they function in your psychology. You know, one to help you get centered, one to prevent you from getting centered. Nice. All right. So, of the many symbols, and remember, every symbol is infinite in the amount of interpretations. Not only do I suggest you have a romance with your imagination, but you also ought to be your own professor of hermeneutics. Is that another $200 word that people don't know what that means? No. Oh God, I thought I'm with people who have education. All right, hermeneutics, Hermes. Right. It's interpretation, the science of interpretation. Things can be spun in so many different ways, and what a difference that makes. Remember, like the frame that you put in, we talked about that last week, the frame that you put on the details of your life? You're saying yes, I only see one head shaking. All right? Yes, we did it, right? So you're in the rat race of the maze. That's what I was saying for our new sister, right? Details of your life are the same. But if you define yourself as being in a rat race, notice what that makes your life. But if you define yourself as being on a pilgrimage to the sacred center, nothing has changed in your life, but the frame in which you see it is very different. So the axis mundi, or the center of the world, this point through which the energies of the planes above form, the celestial world, feeds the terrestrial world. This is one of the symbols. Every time you practice, you chant the mantra. We already did it by just chanting the invocation to Patanjali. We've created our axis mundi. Now we are the center. The cosmos is happening right here. Until you expand your definition to be like a true mystic, right? God is an intelligible sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. So you can define any place as the center, because when two or three are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. So says JC, and I believe him. All right, so the axis mundi. The thing is, you got to remember, this is an ancient teaching. In the ancient teaching, the roots are in heaven, and it goes down into earth. Whereas in the earth plane, the roots are on the earth, and it goes up into heaven. I'm not such a big fan of the ascensionist fantasy, which splits everything to higher and lower, above and below, spiritual and material, that kind of stuff. The ancient teaching is the roots are in the celestial world, who we really are is spiritual, and we go into incarnation in order to take the course, not to transcend your humanity. If you want to read Kaivalya Pada, the 4th chapter of Yoga Sutras, to isolate consciousness and completely divest it from identification with any thought till it can transcend the source of thought itself, if that's possible, go ahead, be my guest. My understanding is we're here to become fully human. And why don't we become fully human? Because it hurts, and because your body dies at the end of that. And they tell you, abhinavesha, we all have fear of death. So I don't want to go there. So instead I'll build a fantasy to some other world that I don't know exists, called a plausibility structure. You can't prove it in a court of law, but you can't disprove it either. The whole culture buys into it, and then we all aspire to that. Not what my teachers have taught me. Earth, life is the greatest gift that there is. No supposed afterlife afterwards. So make the most of this, and whether or not there are planes behind form, you can mess with the occult if you want to, but my teachers just said, be awake right here. Quit quitting. They say, quit holding on to any philosophy or concept. Quit this world, quit the next world, quit quitting. That's the mindset, the little trilogy, right? Quit this world, quit the next world, quit quitting. Get that? Yeah. All right, so here we are. It doesn't matter how or where you find these forms, you'll see the one thing they have in common, because they all are taking us to the journey to the center. The world navel, right? The umbilical cord through which the sluice gate of life force gives autonomy and freedom to something to now come forth and bring its own specific gifts to fruition, right? Oh, I put the wrong thing in. Excuse me. There we go. This should be next. Do you mind if I slide it up now? You don't care, though. We're not professional. The world navel should be up there next. Right? The omphalos. Umbilicos, right? Omphalos, right? Same thing. Look at this as like the pathway icons that they have in India all over, like the Herms. Gets where it comes from, Greek thing. I think it came from India to Greece when Alexander brought Dandaswami back with him. It's also like the Shiva Lingam, which you'll see again, right? How did they know? Remember Indiana Jones and this, right? The Shiva, they stole the Shiva stones, right? Get the idea? Same idea. All right, so back to where that. But anyway, the architectural shapes all over the world throughout history show the same thing. And I realized that not every civilization got to the place where they had high architecture. Some things were much more, we wouldn't say primitive, meaning so far back in proto-history they either didn't have the technology or the tools to do that, but the idea about what was the celestial world and terrestrial world was pretty clear to them. So it doesn't matter if it comes up in form of Roman architecture, which we know is a copy from the Greek, which you'll see in a second. The Egyptians did it in this way. The Blue Mosque in Turkey looks this way. Red Square looks like this. A reproduction of the Babylonian temple in its heyday. All right. The Greeks did the Parthenon this way. Shiva Lingam is this way. It combines kind of a little yoni with the lingam there. Don't you think yoni is a cuter word than vajayjay? Yogis are allowed to say that, We're not supposed to be embarrassed about different parts of our body. Oh, it's okay to talk about the left nostril membrane in the carpet there, but I can't talk about the vajayjay without embarrassment? Or I can't say it in front of my mother? Who taught you that word? Mom, I'm almost 70. It's okay. All right. But again, the celestial tree can be in the shamanic pole all over the world. You have these people climbing up the poles and doing the act of the fakir, right? And then, the dismembered hands come down. He sends the disciple up the pole, the dismembered hands and feet and head come down like that, and then the guy pulls the thing down and the rope falls down. Where's the disciple in the rope, right? Classic shamanic ascendancy, stuff like that. Sufi temple in Delhi. Whoa, remember north, like where the Taj Mahal was, had a little bit more Mughal influence in it than Hindu, but this is late on. This is already like, 13, 14, 1500s already, right? Native American teepees. First peoples in the northwestern Canadian area understood it through totems. Rapa Nui people in Easter Island worshipping the ancestors, because you're not connected to the ancestors, you're disconnected to the source of where you came from, whose blood and bones without which you wouldn't be where you are. Have some gratitude for them. They bequeathed everything to you. Whew. Ziggurat, all across what is now Persia, Iran, Iraq, the whole Mesopotamian area was filled with these ziggurats. You'll see how it comes up again in the Mayan tradition, but you get the idea. Levels, stages, ascendancy. Christian spires, same idea. Egyptian pyramids, same idea. Mosque of Omar in Jerusalem, same idea. Reproduction of the temple in Jerusalem, same idea. Golden Temple of Amritsar in the Punjab, same idea. Machu Picchu in Peru, same idea. Mayan Temple, Chichen Itza, same idea. Stonehenge, Neolithic, same idea. And then a Chinese version, a Japanese version. Do you get it? It's hard not to get it, just from architecture alone, because the space itself is supposed to lift your mind to something. And usually on the inside of the space, it's, whether it's stained glass or not, it's either beautiful, bright, clean, ordered, or filled with images that take your mind to what? Not the daily round. Not to whether or not your 401k will be up, well, or who's going to win the NFL championship and go to the Super Bowl. Nothing that's mundane, or as we would say, no profane teaching, profanum outside of the temple. When we're in the temple, we're in a different mindset. We're trying to hook up with what? With the Axis Mundi, with a reminder about what is the center. And why do you want to get to the center? Because the center is where the origin happens. And the origin is where creativity flows from. And the origin is where healing comes from. That's why in all the primitive cultures, when someone is sick, they put them in the center of the village, they bring the sacred mandala around them, and the whole village goes around them, and they understand we're going to do the ritual that connects us back to the source of where we come from. Because we don't have any being except that being exists, and without being existent, we wouldn't have an existence, because it comes from that. So let's honor that, hook up to that, and hopefully if we do it in the right way, right? There's a lot of formulas, a lot of superstitions, a lot of taboos about what was right and what was wrong. But they believed it, and people get well. So there's a power there. That's what all of this is about in one way. How do you make the journey to the center? Now, the problem with all pilgrimages is at the beginning, you're making a pilgrimage to something that's outside yourself. Whether you're a Muslim and you're supposed to go to Mecca at least once, or you're a Jewish person and say, I have to be at the Wailing Wall. And did I tell you about the Wailing Wall? You know about this? The secular Israeli goes to the Wailing Wall every day. He's very, very cynical about religion, and every day he sees an Orthodox Jew with the tefillin and the tzitzis and the prayer shawl. Every day, davening and wailing and putting the kvittel, it's the little piece of paper that has the thing that normally you bring to the rabbi if you're Hasidic. The secretary gives it to the rabbi to kind of hip him ahead of time, like, all right, this is what the person really needs. But you put that in the prayer wall, you pray to God. So he's praying, he's crying his eyes every day. It goes on for weeks. Finally, he can't handle it, and he says, excuse me, I see you every day with such devotion. And I'm assuming that you're praying to God and asking for things. He says, you're right. He says, well, does God answer you? He says, it's like talking to a wall. Right. So why do we still do these things? I don't know. Really bad, huh?
Yeah,
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I have a low bar. Very low bar. Not what you expected from Oregon, right? One of the nice things about being a yogi, you don't have to fulfill anybody's idea of what a yoga person should be. Right? Isn't that terrible? You have to fit into a mold. You have to be nice. You can't use the F-bomb. Right? Whatever. Right. So the problem is that the pilgrimage is really to something outside yourself, because it represents the holy center, the place you travel to. But what you find out in the course of the pilgrimage is the center is not outside yourself. But like Dorothy, maybe you have to go to Oz before you realize there's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Because very often you don't see it until you go to the ends of the earth to find out that I didn't need to go anywhere to find out what was right inside myself, which they're telling you from the beginning. The answers lie within. But most of us don't have enough confidence or training or strength to go that far within to find out. It's true. All right, so that being said, if you're going to make the pilgrimage to what's inside yourself, you might want to pay attention to some of the yoga versions of their training. Because I like to say, when you get out on the streets, I say this to my students all the time, you trained or untrained? Are you trained or untrained?
Trained.
Yeah. So once you know you're trained, you have to be very, very different in your mindset when you're out in the street. You're not a henny penny sky is falling complex. I'm a little, delicate piece of china from grandma's closet. If I drop, I'll shatter into 1,000 pieces. No, I got an edge to me. I'm a lacquered cup. If I'm dropped, I got some bounce to me. Okay, I'm resilient. I know how to handle things. It gives you a little moxie out there, because yoga makes you simple. But remember, simplicity is multidimensional, and no yogi I ever met was a simpleton, even though they were simple in many ways. Okay, so you got to get over that. I'm being too nice, and I have to have a smile upon my face about everything. It's just unreal. Again, another yardstick with which to beat yourself. So yoga is trying to give you these tips, which you're free to accept or reject, but in terms of the experimental or scientific aspect of it, you can reject it by not trying it, but you're not a very good scientist in my estimation. The idea is, let me try it and see whether or not I get to the same realization, because that's what science is supposed to do. Experimental method, empirical method means, well, you do this and tell me what results you got, because I'm saying if you do this, this is what you get. And then 100 other people in the scientific journal said, I got the same thing too. Let's create a hypothesis about that, since it seems to be repeatable again and again. And that's some of the things that, according to yoga, they're saying is scientific, except our science is a little different than our science, since some of it is a little bit more subjective and anecdotal and not as empirical. But nonetheless, before we get to that, the stretching of the region of what's the possible human, we all live in the lens of a narrative, a story. There's personal stories and there's collective stories we share. Yoga is one of the greatest stories that ever lived, but it's only a story. and it's somebody else's story. Nonetheless, what they're telling you, and here's one of the little tidbits, one of the little things they reckon to help you recognize, because we're in such a messed up place, they're trying to say, help yourself with this if you can. So the second Yoga Sutra is Chitta Vritti Nirodha, the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind stuff. So we recognize that there's mind stuff, and we recognize that it fluctuates. And according to yoga, the idea is, can you calm the mind stuff so that the reflection that the mind stuff gives you, the mirror-like quality of it showing you what is less distorted, is less fragmented, is less filled with what they would say ignorance. And I don't mean ignorance about, so can you name all the people who are on the Bears this year? Who gives a shit about? No, not that.
Oh, the Viking.
Right, whatever. That's vijnana, that's not jnana. Yoga wants you to understand what happens if you could stop the waves in your mind long enough to see what is there. So first they need to tell you, well, you need to identify the waves in your mind so you're not going to get sidetracked by what's going on, and you can only do that if you observe or pay attention again and again, because there's some habitual wearing down that we got to do. Remember, that's the essence of meditation. We are at the tendency not to look, because there's a lot of stuff that we don't want to look at, or we're in denial of, or it hurts, or we don't have the skill set to deal with it because it's too traumatic, or whatever. And the boldness of meditation, tomorrow I'm about to do something for the Artists Coalition. The first thing you learn is art doesn't say no to anything in life. That's why I read the guest house thing, right? Because yoga is an art form also. Art doesn't say no to anything in life. So the moment you're holding back or resisting, or you don't want it there already, you know you're not dancing in the tantric way, right? And I'm not saying there aren't things that sometimes have to be resisted, or boundaries and stuff like that. Think beyond that. It doesn't say no to anything. So here are the 5 vrittis, according to them, which every thought that you have, every state of consciousness can be glommed onto one of these 5. And of course, you'll see right away which are the ones they think you are aiming for, or at least which are the ones to be aware of so as not to be caught by them or influence them, because that's the essence of meditation, the delay between thought and action. Not every thought pertains to reality, so you ought to be aware of them before you're choosing whether or not to follow up on it. The first vritti is called pramana. Everybody say that. Pramana, P-R-A-M-A-N-A, pramana. It's a concept derived from the Sanskrit root word brahma, which means correct notion, true knowledge, basis of foundation, accuracy. So these are kind of the waves that you would say, it corresponds to reality. Why did I put the cute little tiger cups up there?
Why'd you put the cute little tiger cups up
It's
there?
for sure. Do you know that there are 2 new brand tiger cubs that were born at the Lincoln Park Zoo? Yeah, well, you don't have to believe me. You can go to the big cat cage yourself, and you can see whether or not they're there. And if they're there, that perception would be pramana, an accurate view, that you're tallying what is happening in reality with what you see. That's the kind of stuff that we're really after in the big picture. A lot of pramana, okay? And where there's smoke, there's fire. There's a little inference here, right? If you see smoke, you assume there's a fire, but you should go check it out. But I'm saying that kind, because they would say inference from an authoritative figure. It's dangerous, though, right? That means you're putting your assumption this person has authority, knows what they're talking about. And believe me, a lot of people can write books and not have the experience, so. But nonetheless, they say that. And then direct experience and scriptural knowledge, which is another tough one, because again, you're projecting upon scripture something that's made by human beings. So, but nonetheless, the basic idea is you can check things out, and when there's a one-to-one correspondence, that kind of vritti in your mind is pramana, that's what you're after for sure. But then there's what they call viparyaya, V-I-P-A-R-Y-A-Y-A, viparyaya. Everybody say that. Viparyaya. It basically means reversed understanding, the absence of something or the non-existence of something when you take it to be something other than what it was. What is that? Looks like a kind of garden hose, right? But before you flipped on the light, you thought it was a snake. Ah! Oh, garden hose. Ah! So not like you hallucinated, there was something there, but you took it to be other than what it was. When your mind works that way, that vritti is called a viparyaya, a kind of misunderstanding, or you didn't see what was really going on. That's not the one that you want to hang out with most of the time, but you want to find out, I do that a lot. I take that for granted a lot. Right? Yeah. The third one, and this is the one I have a lot of truck with, is vikalpa, V-I-K-A-L-P-A. Everybody say that? Vikalpa, it means imagination. The fantasy or illusion of thinking things that do not exist, or imagining future situations which also don't exist, right? Because if it's in the future, it's not yet, it's unknown really. And so this is a big one, but at least when you're in that mode, right, know that your mind is daydreaming, so to speak. Now, this is one in terms of me as a contemporary practitioner. I know where they're going with it, but you know what? Nothing changes unless imagination comes to perceive something different and hopefully better, evolving it into something that piggybacks somehow on what has been bequeathed to us from before, and yet takes it to another level for the good of everybody. I would think that's imagination, and although from their point of view it's just a vritti, but when you work on that, it becomes something that can actually, like you say, the purpose of dreams is to build sandcastles in the sky, but the purpose of reality to put foundations underneath them. So I'm not so sure that imagination isn't one of our most important faculties, if you could learn to flex it. But in our country, for instance, we have rigor mortis of the imagination. How many times have you heard me say that? We have rigor mortis of the imagination. Can you believe how lame our own legislative body is? The vested interest behind that of career politicians. They can't come up with any better ideas. That's supposed to be the best of what Americans can think about how to take care of the polis. The problem is the scale, right? So we have to not only look to government, which should have some regulatory power because of the scale, right? I mean, any state that claims states' rights is fine as long as the hurricane doesn't hit them. And then once the hurricane hits them, they realize, we don't have the resources at a local level to deal with that. Yeah, well, that's the idea behind government. It's not supposed to take care of everything, but in terms of the things that can't be done at a small scale, that's the purpose of it, if it's run correctly and justly, but we all know what that is. So the non-governmental thing has a lot to do with imagination. You got to think up something new. You have to come up with some kind of creativity. But nonetheless, from the yoga point of view, it's a vritti that isn't pramana, because it's yet to be proved. But I think this is a really important one for almost all of us. And a lot of the reasons, like I say, why people don't have dreams is, don't fulfill their dreams is they don't have any. And I'll give you another one of my little teachings. Why don't people have any dreams? Because they're not specific. And why aren't they specific? Because once you're specific about what you want and what you think you would like, you've just specified the guidelines for failure. And people who are successful do what failures don't like to do. The fourth one is smrti, S-M-R-T-I, smrti. Everybody say that. Smrti. And the next one connected to that is, it's not here, but because it's called shruti, S-H-R-U-T-I, shruti. Everybody say that. Shruti. So really they're connected, smrti, shruti, because once you hear it, you learn it, right? But smrti is a word which really means remembrance. So any time you recall any past object or situation, that's another wave in the mind. So the fact that you'd be calling something that actually happened, it then kind of focuses into pramana. But pramana is much more about something that's happening in the moment that tallies, whereas smrti is about remembering something that happened in the past and now you're recalling it. It's one of the two types of Vedic literature. And this is what the Upanishads are all about. You sit, upa means near, ni means down, shad means sit, sitting near and down to the teacher. And Swami always used to say that living with God is the true education. The other term, shruti, has to do with hearing. So it considers that the smrti, or the remembered, comes from the remembered teachings, versus the texts which are shrutis, which are literally heard from the master's lips. So in a certain way, the shruti teachings, or what you learn from the actual master, is better than the smrti, or the remembered teachings, which just was written down in the book and then you read it, from their point of view. But anytime you remember anything, that's another vritti, another wave in the mind. And remember, the idea is to stop all vrittis, including the pramana. And then the last one is what's called nidra, N-I-D-R-A. Everybody say that. Nidra, like yoga nidra. This is where it means sleep, literally. But it's supposed to be the meditation practices that induces conscious relaxation to the point where, get this is really hard to think about, you stay awake during deep dreamless sleep. What? But deep dreamless sleep, by definition, is there's nobody aware of anything. I know. That's what makes it so paradoxical. That's the fourth state. We've measured another brainwave. And it ain't the waking state, it ain't the dreaming state, and it ain't the deep dreamless state. And the yogis claim, I don't know anybody who experiences this, teaches this. Anybody who says they do, send me a postcard, I want to meet this person. And if you experience it, send me a postcard, I want to find out how you got there. But according to yoga, and this is where maybe you could say language fails, or concepts can only take you so far, because once it gets into experience, here, have some mango. What does it taste like? Strawberry? No, taste it. But what, like pear? No, not really. Like taste it. At some point, but again, to experience some of these things, the amount of energy you probably have to invest in it is way more than people want to, because the idea of being tivra vegan and getting an instant zap, you like that intellectually. But what you really have to do to let go of everything else in your life, which unfortunately most of us cling to desperately as our identity, to get to that state and find out if it's true, we're not willing to do. So then we're back to, well, you're in time and it's going to take you much more of a process to get here. But according to yoga, if you practice, you can be successful in moving through these different states of deep relaxation and maintaining perfect lucidity as you transit into what apparently is something we cannot even describe. The physicist David Bohm is one of the few people I know who's even made an attempt to describe what happens at the fourth stage of this apparently not deep dreamless sleep, but something else is happening, yet it's not the other ones. He called it the implicate order, that consciousness withdraws within itself like into a cocoon, where its potential to manifest is held in latency. So everything that could be explicitly stated at some point is now only implicitly there, but not yet fully manifest. Whoa. That's all you can say. Those are the 5 vrittis. And remember, yoga's game is to stop all vrittis. Not just exchange the negative vrittis for the positive vrittis, pratipraksha bhavanam, by all means. Like, learn how to take your mind from a negative place and go to the opposite. Even the Buddha said something like that. He was pretty hip. So that's good. But they're saying, no, being a righteous do-gooder and just exchanging the iron chain for the golden chain, you're still not free. Very high bar. What we're trying to do here? Be free from all thought. Because the end, kaivalya, is isolation of consciousness from identification with any thought. The third sutra is the identification of the seer with the seen that causes all suffering. Because you take yourself, viparyaya, to be what you're not. And then you bought into the whole game. And now you're in time, and now your body, and now you're going to age, and now you're going to suffer, and now you're going to hate. And, yeah, great. So the paradox here is, to really do this, you're going to have to die to your humanity. But I thought you just said we're supposed to like incarnate and like fulfill our humanity. Yeah, that's what I said. But again, who am I? I'm not an enlightened being. I'm just telling you what yoga says. I'm telling you what a contemporary practitioner is sloshing around in the trenches like you are, trying to make sense of it all. But if it's a choice between negating my humanity or fulfilling my humanity, as I like to say, I don't know what enlightenment is. But I will claim boldly to say I know what my own humanity is. And that makes me understand what your humanity is, whether you recognize that or not. And because I'm a hippie. I don't mind saying that. I love what happened in my generation. Yeah. It's all about love. And we are deeply warm, caring, biosocial creatures by nature. That's the story I'm sticking to. Okay, so that was that part. I hope you got something from that. And then we're moving on to, so for my friend from out of town, the Sufis say, just as a dog is not a good dog because it's a good barker, so a yoga teacher is not a good yoga teacher because he or she is a good talker. So, should talker rhyme with barker? Not really, but maybe if I find a foreign language, I could make them rhyme together in a couplet. Right, so now it's time to actually do the work. Oh yes, you're here to do some work. By the way, we're telling you, why wait till the end of the class? Because some people are so spaced out at the end of the class they can't even remember. Tell them right now.
Okay. So 2 things. Next week, after the class is over, you're welcome to socialize and stay over. We'll have some snacks and water and tea.
We'll have like very yogic-oriented snacks, right?
Absolutely.
We won't have like the buffalo wings and like the hot, no. We'll have the things that become the proper food for people practicing yoga, the sattvic food.
So like seeds and beans and
Exactly.
rice.
And all organic for sure.
And another announcement, tomorrow, Karen Prentice, who's sitting over there, will be teaching a meditation workshop here at the temple from 9 o'clock till 3:30 p.m. Do you mind saying a few words about the
Shameless
workshop?
marketing, go ahead.
It's a beginning meditation class, and part of the idea, we're doing a series this year at the temple called Maturing a Meditation Practice. Excuse me, and we're starting it with a beginning meditation class. So obviously, I'm sure all of you are meditators, but if you know somebody who's been wanting to start a practice, the purpose of the workshop is to help people not question, am I doing it right? Is it really working? But sort of to understand what the process of meditation is, so they can begin practice. And join us at the temple.
So tomorrow, 9 a.m.
9 a.m., 9 a.m.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, here we go. So everyone's going to start off by having your mat, short end of your mat against the wall, have a chair with its back to the wall, chair seat facing the center of the wall, and then have a block and a blanket as well. So your mat, short end against the wall, the chair against the wall with a chair seat facing the center of the room, and then a blanket and a block.